Well, hello, Grants Church. We are in the middle of a series, and I'm actually preaching this the same day that I preached the last message for last week, because I'm going to be on I will have been on vacation by the time you watch this for a week, and I'll be either headed back or I'll already be home. I'm not sure. It just depends on when you watch it. But today we're going to be in Exodus chapters 15 through 17. And this is actually a moment of testing for the people of Israelites, for the people of the Israelites. And I'll tell you what, I hated tests. How about you, Keegan and Kinsey Williams? Did you guys like tests, or do you guys like tests? Are you glad that school is now over? I know school has been a real challenge for a lot of our kids, ending online and not being able to go to school has been a very challenging time for all of our kids. But I'm sure that you're glad that you don't have to worry about tests anymore. So I wasn't very good at tests either. Here's the thing. My ACT scores, they were decent. They were okay. I actually did get a little bit of a scholarship because of my ACT. But because of my math scores on my ACT, I actually ended up having to take remedial math at Oklahoma Christian University, and it was actually a super easy class. It was an online class. I was able to finish it in 2 weeks. I knew the material. I had studied the material. I just did really bad on my test. Well, the Israelites have several tests in the wilderness, and so we're actually going to read. We're not going to read those tests. So if you want to read them, you can actually turn over to Exodus chapter 15, starting in verse 22, and you can read through the end of chapter 17, and you can actually read word for word those tests. So if you want to do that, you can go ahead and pause the video right now, or if you're listening on the podcast, pause it, read those passages, but I'm going to summarize them here in a minute. So if you just want to listen to my summarization, you can do that as well. So pause it here if you want to stop and read Exodus 15:22 through chapter 17. So chapter 15 begins with this massive praise service to God, and it's led by Marion. It's led by Moses. They're leading the people in this incredible praise ceremony and process, and they're just praising God for everything that's happened over the past several months as God set them free and destroyed the Egyptians in the Red Sea and all these different things. So it's really amazing. And then it ends with them arriving in a desert called Mara, where the water is too bitter to drink. So this is the first test that they face. Bitter water. They don't have the water that they need. If you're, several 100,000 people traveling through the desert, and you get to a place that's an oasis, and there's water there, but it's no good to drink, you can see how that would be very frustrating. My kids get a little bit complainy just on a 3-mile hike. Can you imagine what's going on in the families and all the people who are, traveling with their animals and kids of all ages, and they get to this oasis and the water's too bitter to drink. Well, they grumble and complain, as you can expect, and as we probably would have as well. What are we going to drink? They ask Moses. And God reveals a piece of wood to Moses that Moses can throw into the water and make the water sweet. Wouldn't it be good to have some wood like that here in Grants? That'd be really nice. So then the Israelites move on from that oasis to another oasis, the oasis of Elim, and it's a wonderful place. It's got enough water. It's got enough palm trees for everybody. It seems to be a really nice place. And then the people move on from there. They move into a place called the Wilderness of Sin. And in the Wilderness of Sin, this isn't in reference to the English word sin. It's actually probably more connected to the mountain of Sinai. And so it doesn't mean that this is a wilderness where known for its sinfulness or anything like that. It's a proper name that's probably connected in some way to Mount Sinai. But in this wilderness, they don't have food. And the people, again, grumble against Moses and Aaron. This is test number 2. They don't have food. And they say, if only we had died in Egypt, where we sat around all these pots of meat and we ate all the food that we wanted. They seem to have forgotten the slavery and the abuse and the killing of their sons. I mean, there's really terrible things. And but what I've noticed about me, and maybe you've noticed it about you as well, is that we tend to get selective memory. Whenever we're going through a really hard time, we look back at another time and say, oh, it was so much better. And we remember all the wonderful parts of that existence. And we talk about how bad it is right here and right now. But we forget and we ignore the challenges that we were facing at that time as well. Do you ever find yourself doing that, having selective memory? But again, God responds to their grumbling, and he provides quail. Quail are blown in from somewhere, and then he also provides kind of like a bread replacement, a thing called manna that would come with the dew, and the people would go out and collect it each morning. Then they move on from the desert of Sin, and they camp at a place called Rephidim. And in Rephidim, they run into another problem, test number 3, which is no water. So in Mara, they had bitter water. Here in Rephidim, they have no water. And you would think that a God who had done all these incredible things, he had just performed incredible things with water. He had turned water to blood. He had parted water. He had made water sweet. You would think that a God who had done all of that could be trusted. But no. The people grumble and they complain against Moses. And Moses, when he turns to God and speaks to God, he is even afraid for his life. He thinks that people are about to stone him. And again, God miraculously comes through, and Moses strikes the rock at Mount Sinai, and water gushes out, and they have water. And then they run into another test. And we aren't really told how the people respond to this, but you can imagine that they were probably pretty fearful. But then the Amalekites attack. And Joshua goes out to fight the Amalekites. And Moses stands up on a high place above the battle, and he holds up the staff of God that he's been given, that he turns into a snake and all these different things, and that he struck the water with and parted the water and the Nile, all those things. It's a special staff. So he raises it up, and when he raises up the staff, they win. But when his arms get too tired and he drops the staff, the Israelites lose. And so Aaron, Moses' brother, and Hur, Moses' brother-in-law, the husband of Miriam, they actually come up with a solution. So they pull up a rock for Moses, set him down, and each one gets on either side of Moses, and they hold his arms up, and the Israelites prevail and win the battle. So what's really interesting about this is that there are some similarities between us and the Israelites in this moment. And the first similarity is this, is that we are a community on the move. We are on the move from a past act of redemption and on to a future promised goal. That's what this whole series has been about. This whole series has been about being a community on the move in that space between the promise and the fulfillment of the promise. And in John chapter 14, as I've already mentioned, Jesus tells his disciples, thereby us, that he is going to prepare a place for them. And guess what? He's going to come back and get us. And here's the thing about communities on the move. When communities are on the move, they face constant challenges. There are moments of triumph, but there are also moments of loss. There are moments of need. There are moments of attack from both circumstances and enemies. The Israelites are being attacked by the circumstances that they're facing. The lack of food, the lack of water, the bitter water, but they're also being attacked by enemies. And when you're a community on the move, there are moments of attack. And I would say that at this moment in our history as a church, we are in many ways being attacked. But let me tell you something. If we have eyes to see what God is doing, we can see incredible movement of God in the midst of these things. I was just talking with a friend yesterday how there are just unexpected blessings that are coming from all of this COVID-19 stuff that we're having to experience and face. But the second similarity, not only are we a community on the move who is facing difficult circumstances at times, but these circumstances can cause us to lose our foundation. You know, for Israel, their foundation was knowing Yahweh. Their foundation was knowing the Lord their God of their ancestors, and knowing what he was capable of and trusting his promises. That was their foundation, yet sometimes their circumstances would cause them to lose that foundation. In fact, 3 of the 4 tests that we just looked at, they lose their foundation. And I can tell you this, that sometimes we also are in danger of losing our foundation. In the letter of 1 Peter, Peter writes to several churches that are located north and east of Jerusalem. And they are struggling under what Peter calls fiery ordeals. And he begins a letter with their foundation. He wants to remind them of their foundation because Peter knows, that circumstances can sometimes cause people to lose their foundation. And maybe, perhaps, circumstances today are causing you to lose your foundation. So I want to end this message today by reading some verses from this letter of 1 Peter. And I hope that you will go back and read the entire letter. But I think that this may be something that we begin to cover in the future. I'm maybe a class or maybe another set of sermons after we finish the book of Exodus. I don't know, but this is just such a powerful passage that I'm about to read that I think it's worth diving into and diving deeper into. But I just want to read this. 1 Peter chapter 1, starting in verse 1. This letter is from Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ. I am writing to God's chosen people who are living as foreigners in the provinces of Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. God the Father knew you and chose you long ago, and his Spirit has made you holy. As a result, you have obeyed him and have been cleansed by the blood of Jesus Christ. May God give you more and more grace and peace. Don't we need that today, church? More and more grace and peace. Verse 3. All praise to God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. It is by his great mercy that we have been born again, because God raised Jesus Christ from the dead. Now we live with great expectation. I love that. We live with great expectation. Verse 4. And we have a priceless inheritance, an inheritance that is kept in heaven for you, pure and undefiled, beyond the reach of change and decay. And through your faith, God is protecting you by his power until you receive this salvation, which is ready to be revealed on the last day for all to see. So be truly glad. There is wonderful joy ahead, even though you must endure many trials for a little while. These trials will show that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold, though your faith is far more precious than mere gold. So when your faith remains strong through many trials, it will bring you much praise and glory and honor on the day when Jesus Christ is revealed to the whole world. You love him, even though you have never seen him. Though you do not see him now, you trust him, and you rejoice with a glorious, inexpressible joy. The reward for trusting him will be the salvation of your souls. Skip to verse 13. So prepare your minds for action and exercise self-control. Put all your hope in the gracious salvation that will come to you when Jesus Christ is revealed in the world. So you must live as God's obedient children. Don't slip back into your old ways of living to satisfy your own desires. You didn't know any better then, but now you must be holy in everything you do, just as God who chose you is holy. For the scriptures say, you must be holy because I am holy. What encouraging words in this moment that we as a church find ourselves in. In this fiery ordeal, this place of wilderness, this place between the promise and the fulfillment of the promise, this place between the act of redemption and the ultimate return of Jesus. Let's set our feet upon this foundation that Peter envisions for his churches that he's speaking to. And so my invitation to you is, don't let this wilderness move beyond a place to a state of mind. This is what happened with the Israelites. The wilderness moved beyond a place to a state of mind in their minds and in their hearts. And when that happens, you are subject to pessimism, seeing everything in the most negative possible light. You're subject to complaining and grumbling and cynicism and fear and blaming and fighting and all these different things that happen. When the wilderness moves beyond a place to a state of mind. And my invitation to you is to don't let that happen, and instead set your feet on the foundation of Jesus. Remember who you are. Peter reminds the churches there. He reminds them who they are. He says, you are born again, and you can live with great expectation for the future. You have a priceless inheritance, no matter what the stock market is doing. God is protecting you, regardless of what kind of virus is running rampant in the world. God is protecting you until you receive your salvation. And there is wonderful joy in our futures, even if we do have to face trials for a little while. And guess what? These trials are going to purify you. Just like gold is purified by fire. But guess what? Your faith is worth so much more than pure gold. And the reward for trusting Jesus is going to be salvation. You see, church, we must set our feet on the true foundation. Don't allow these circumstances to cause you to lose your foundation. Instead, set your feet on the only true foundation, and that is Jesus Christ. Be blessed, church.